Child. Child. Child.
What is this?
My love. My love.
Don't listen to them, 2B.
Together forever. Together forever. Carry me. Carry.
They don't have any feelings. They're just imitating human speech. Let's take them out.
Feed me. Love. Love.
So I've just finished playing Nier Automata and I want to talk about this game. I've actually been looking forward to this game for a while because it did look very promising, and it's been a roller coaster for me. Playing it at first I felt like it was kind of a little bit of a boring game. It was interesting, but the mechanics just weren't clicking with me at first, but then it got better as I went on. So as always, I'm going to start with the negatives because they are some of the things that hit me first, and also because that's how I like to do these videos to begin with. One of the first things that annoyed me was that many conversations are not voiced. This is a AAA title. There aren't that many things happening and that many conversations to be had with NPCs in side quests, for example, but not just. And I just don't see why they didn't voice them. They shouldn't have, saved money there. That's just not something that belongs in a AAA title in 2017. The next point is that most of the graphics are actually very low res. I mean, not the characters themselves, but if you walk around and look at the walls or look at the environment, you'll notice that there are a lot of details that just don't look very good or are missing completely. And the graphics go as far as to look as bad as some PlayStation 3 graphics. Now, again, I don't mean the whole game, I mean certain parts of the game and the environment. And this is obviously, again, just because the game is essentially a console port and they did want to make it run as good as possible on the consoles that it goes out on, and since consoles are pretty shitty computers, they don't really manage to work very well with high-end graphics, so they had to save and they had to reduce resolutions, etc. And that's one of those reasons, but it is something that you'll notice, especially if you play on PC. It actually, at times, it reminded me of some older Metal Gear titles. That's how far it goes. Now, the fighting system is generally really good. You can fight and you can use very different strategies in your fight. You have different weapons which then essentially give you a different moveset. And that's pretty cool, but the fights can be very chaotic at times. And it can really be on the edge of button mashing. So that's something that I didn't like as much. It just felt a bit too chaotic for me. All in all, was good, but the fact that there was so much chaos on the battlefield was disturbing me. The fighting on its own can also be very repetitive, not only chaotic, because you end up fighting very often the same enemies, constantly, and there are lots of them on the map that will charge you. Yeah, you can just ignore them and not fight them, but feels like it's a miss because you want to level up to get your character stronger, because that's another thing, the enemies don't scale with you, so you might actually end up in places where you fight enemies that are 15, 20 levels above you, and that can cause you some trouble. That happened to me at first, and it just takes a very long time to defeat them because your damage output is so minimal. The cinematics in this game, for some reason, are capped at 30 frames. So whenever I had a cinematic, it would go down to 30 frames. When I played, it would go up to 60 again, and that was it. It could not exceed 60 frames all in all. That's something that's okay. I can work with 60 frames. The game runs smoothly at 60 frames, so it's nothing to complain about. But it was just weird that it uses even the in-game engine for most of the cinematics, and it still caps it at 30 frames, which just felt weird to me. No idea why they did that. The 2D cameras that you get when you go into side-scrolling sections or something like that. Now, I think that this variety that's being offered is really good, but it felt like at times the 2D camera was extremely restrictive, and I did not see a point to it. And not just the 2D camera, also the overhead camera. At times you would be like from a bird's view on your character, and you couldn't see further than like maybe 10 meters from your character in any direction. So there are mobs coming at you. There's way you're basically chasing the minimap at that point, because if the way is gonna separate, you might even miss it. And that happened to me in one of the caves in the game, and it was something that I did not like at all. I think that these cameras, still we have to consider that all these side scrolling and top and stuff these are all camera tricks. The game actually does not change any real mechanics all in all. So I gotta commend them for doing something that is so original and so risky at the same time, because nobody else has done that in a while, and they're showing real balls. So I applaud that. But there were a few times when I just felt this camera is restricting me, and it should not be the case. Just really limiting my enjoyment of the current situation of the game as I was playing it. So they should have maybe removed some of these, or adjusted them, or given you a wider field of view or something. I don't know. It's just that, especially with the bird eye view, if they give you a wider field, your character is going to become really small, making it harder to fight properly. So yes, some of these didn't work, especially the bird eye view one was not working for me. Now, when it comes to the storyline, there's something that they have a fear of death, these androids and stuff, and you see it multiple times addressed during the game. I don't understand why though, because they have uploaded you constantly save basically and upload your data to their server. So if you get destroyed, you just have your data downloaded onto a new body, which is essentially the same in your life again. You basically just lose a few memories between your two saves, and the way they behave is like this is a big deal, and people like the commander in the bunker, for example, several times says things like "Don't die on me" and stuff. She's worried, She wouldn't be worried about this stuff. She doesn't sound like she's worried about potential data. She's not like, "Don't die, we don't want to lose the data you have now," or something like that. She's genuinely sounding like she's worried about the actual characters. That makes absolutely no sense, because there is no danger of actual death for them. This is not death. Respawning is not dying. And this is very unbelievable for me, and when the story presents this, I'm very confused as to why this is the case. We must still remain with the thought that these androids are designed to be basically like humans. They are thinking like them, they have emotions, but if I was an android, for example, since I'm a human, and I knew that if I die, I'll just respawn and forget the last, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 hours, the last day, that'll be okay. I can live with that. I would not be worried. And I would definitely not, as commander, tell my grunts, "Don't die on me," be very worried about them. The only thing I would worry about is if they had some kind of information that's important, and they might lose it by dying. Then I would tell them, "This information is very important. You have to stay alive. We need it." Or transfer it at any cost, transfer just this data without anything else, and then for all I care, the suicide, explode your body, and we'll download you into a new one. It doesn't matter. So that was something that I found stupid, to be honest. The next point is that this game is obviously a Japanese game, and the original language in which it came out was Japanese. So all the animations, all the cinematics, the lip syncing is made for the Japanese words, which when they speak English looks completely off.
9S!
I prepared this just for you. I mean, after all, we all need something to fight for, don't we?
You son of a... I'll kill you!
Yes! That's it. That's the feeling. Pure hate!
And it's really quite extreme. It feels like they're not even close to what they're saying. And I've seen other Japanese games where it just didn't look that bad. So I don't know what happened here. And I think actually it's the exaggerated animations, especially the facial animations, which I generally did not like. Things like, for example, Adam and Eve's facial animations, especially Adam's, where he screams. It's just the distorted face and looks really weird and just doesn't look good to me personally. So that was disturbing me, that the lip sync was completely out of sync with what was being said. And another thing that disturbed me is that there are no speaking animations outside of cinematics. So if two characters are talking, nobody's mouth or anything is moving. The faces are dead. And I'm sure they could have put some minimal animation. You can't zoom in on their faces in most cases anyway, so you wouldn't be able to tell what's happening. They could have definitely done something like that. Now, another thing that I really liked is the fact that the antagonists actually do have pretty bad facial animations. I did mention it now, but all in all, in general, their bodies also looked weird to me. It just didn't seem very good. You know, the protagonists looked pretty good, but especially Adam and Eve, they just looked weird. And again, the facial animations, those were horrible. Now, you have to play this game and play it. Have 3 playthroughs of the game to actually see the proper ending. In the first playthrough, you're going to play as the female character 2B, the main character at the beginning. In the second playthrough, you play as 9S, and you see all these missions from before, which you did with 2B from his perspective, which means that you have about 85 to 90% of content, which is absolutely identical to your first playthrough. And in the third playthrough, you get to play as several characters, and it switches dynamically. And what annoyed me here is simply that this feels like the game's been stretched artificially. They could have just done what they did in the third playthrough with the first and second, merged them into one and switched dynamically. It works really well, and it would save a lot of hours. And I think that was done exclusively for that purpose, exclusively for it. And I find it always annoying when game developers try to extend the time we play by making us replay things or making us do things like travel for long times, run around really slowly. And that's, for example, another thing that they did is that fast travel becomes available a bit later in the story, not immediately. And that's something that annoyed me as well, because there's no reason for that. The story reason that is given to you is basically nonsense. Okay, so they have continuity problems as well. When we see in the game machines that express themselves, that speak, and they start by speaking pretty badly, everyone, each and every of our characters is actually surprised at first, and they're wondering what's up. Machines shouldn't be able to speak, they say. But then in playthrough 2, where we're playing as 9S, we see different flashbacks to a very long time ago, where we can see how the bosses became bosses and stuff like that. And several of these flashbacks are hundreds of years ago. Just as an example, the King in the Forest is shown 256 years ago, and he speaks fluently with the others, and so do they. So how come our super advanced androids, who have been fighting this common enemy for thousands of years, suddenly now are realizing that machines are starting to speak and are being surprised, when you consider that in the flashback 260 years ago almost, they were already, very articulate and speaking normally. It's impossible they didn't meet any machines that were talking, because all of them are in this flashback. So, yeah, they could have paid more attention to that. It's nitpicking, I know, but it is something that I noticed and I want to address it. Now, as a PC port, this port is not good at all. Now, when it runs really well. I didn't have any bugs. At least I can't think of any, really. And the frame rate was really good. But if you just check the internet, you're going to see that the performance all over the place. People are having so many various problems. My personal one was crashes. The game would crash, and it crashed many times over. And I would actually have to replace certain parts because I couldn't save. And since I learned that the game's going to crash like crazy, I just saved like all the time. Whenever I see a save point, I save. If I fight a boss and I win, I immediately rush to the save point in order to save it, because I know any second now it could happen. It happened even mid-boss fights a few times, which was really annoying. Just to give you a feeling for it, in 30 hours or 30-something hours, I probably had between, I'd say, 15 to 25 crashes. So that's almost a crash an hour, Very, very often. A lot of crashing, and it could have a million reasons. Nobody can tell you. I checked on the internet. It's just so much that could change it. People are trying different things and they're working for them, but most of them are so invasive that I don't want to do it. I just thought to myself, fuck it, I'll just save and that's it. And I accepted the problem. But this is what's bad nowadays, that the developers release things. I mean, the Japanese suck at releasing ports. They're not good at making PC ports, because essentially in Japan, people are selling games mostly for consoles, mainly for the PlayStation, of course, but there are a few Xbox owners out there, so they release the games for that too. And the PC platform for gaming in Japan is not as popular as consoles. And so they haven't been paying that much attention to the international markets, but now they started to. We've seen they're releasing more and more ports. We've seen also older games being released as ports, and they're getting better at it, but it's kind of slow. And you see, this is one of the reasons we have these problems. So I hope in the future that won't be the case. I'm willing to forgive it for now and call it inexperienced porting, but I hope it gets better, because these are AAA titles. They charge full price, and they are broken games. And I think it's absolutely unfair to charge the full price for a game when it doesn't run properly, when it's gonna cause so many problems. But we've seen this over and over again. It's bad practice, and unfortunately, when a game itself is good, we're hardly gonna boycott it because of that. I gotta say, I knew that it's gonna have problems before I bought it, and I still bought it because I wanted to play it. That is the problem. When something is nice, you're willing to make compromises, and that's why we pay the price. So continuing on, you have to farm materials for your weapon upgrades. So if you want to upgrade your weapon, you gotta go and kill animals for their hides. You gotta do various stuff, and farming for weapon upgrades has been annoying for me. For most of them, I didn't have to farm much, but when I did have to do it, it was just not fun. I don't like farming in general. But okay, you can't blame that. They have to require some kind of work put into it. If you don't upgrade your weapons, but you're playing on low difficulties, you can still do it without problems. It's just gonna take longer, that much longer to defeat enemies every time, which can be boring and annoying at the same time. So, you're gonna have to farm. Another thing I didn't like is that the male protagonist 9S, I have several gripes with him. Now, first of all, why do all the androids from Yorha look like hot Victoria's Secret models, but at the same time, the one male android, and that's really the only one I could find in Yorha, that's 9S, looks like a little boy. He's an absolute pussy, and it's something that I don't like. Why not make him look properly? Like a man. He doesn't have to be the biggest, most muscular Duke Nukem guy. But if you look at the Resistance, they got all kinds of manly looking androids. So there is no reason why these sexist bitches from the bunker would make him look like a little boy, the poor bastard. It just sucks. He's a really cool character nonetheless. They give him an awesome story. He's probably also what you would say is the protagonist of the actual game, although at first it looks like it's 9B. For me, it's actually him. But his clothes also suck. All the Yorha babes are wearing really nice designer clothes, really, really stylish. And 9S is just dressed again like a schoolboy, and it's just stupid. The worst of all, he has a choker, which is basically like the medal for giving head. You don't give that to a guy. That's just emasculate him additionally. So I didn't like the design of 9S. That's what I'm trying to say in short. Now, the next point that I want to address is boss recycling. I did say that you're gonna fight many similar enemies, or basically the identical enemies, over and over again. And that is unfortunately true for the bosses. You're going to be fighting the same bosses several times. Sometimes there'll be a unique boss, but many times you'll be like, oh yeah, I saw that guy, I killed him earlier. Oh yeah, it's the same guy I killed twice already, you know what I mean? And then there are these different bosses, like for example the sphere bosses, which they appear so many times, and at one time, for example, it's the sphere boss, but now it's like 10 spheres attached to each other, so it's a centipede of spheres. So they did that, that's something that they could have done better. I'm not a fan of boss recycling. But okay, enough with the bad. Let's move on to the good. And the first thing I want to mention here is the character development. At the beginning, the characters look kind of bland, kind of boring, but then as soon as the story starts, showing itself, the characters get really interesting. The story gets really exciting. So the character development is excellent in this game. And thanks to that and the story, I actually felt more than just the normal enjoyment out of playing a game, but I actually got invested into it and invested into the story. The second thing I want to address is the fact that there are no loading screens besides the ones between some important cutscenes, and when you start the game, all the territories are seamlessly connected. You just run from A to B, and if you decide to teleport, you're going to see a loading screen, but other than that, you're going to be running around. They're all connected. This is again probably made possible in part because of that low resolution and other stuff like that. The maps aren't that big. They're basically really big tunnels connected to each other with some deviation, but all in all, they aren't big, but there are still hidden areas, so that's pretty cool. There is stuff to explore and to do. It's not boring. I like also the fact that there are bullet hells in this game. Bullet hell is basically what you see, if you remember, in old shooters and stuff from the console days when we had Nintendo, Segas, and stuff like that. These bullet hell shooters are basically involving enemies shooting an insane amount of projectiles at you, but these projectiles usually are super slow, and fairly easy to evade. And here in this game, we're giving enough tools to deal with that. It's actually really, really well done, and I applaud them for doing something like that because, again, it's very brave and it does offer variety. It's something that's very interesting, and it looks very cool when, especially when you play it in the normal fighting positions where you have free control of your camera. It just looks so out of place but so curious. I loved it. You get, after you beat the game, you get a chapter select, and the chapter select enables you to get one of the many endings, and that's something that I will address later in detail. But it's just great because other games would force you to replay the game or to load a save from before, which then would limit you just to seeing certain things. Here with the chapter select, you can really go as close to several endings as you want, and then just initiate them and see all the things the game has to offer without having to completely replay it. I really value that, and I think it's awesome. Now, the next point I want to address is hacking. 9S has a hacking ability, and he can hack enemies with his minigame. And while the minigame of hacking, like in most other places, in most other games, gets really boring and repetitive, even though they tried it, it's still very original. First of all, it's kind of a 9-bit, 8-bit, not 9-bit. It's kind of an 8-bit kind of looking game, and the music, as you are in this level, also becomes 8-bit, which is pretty original. And it's not a different song. So the ambient music which runs in the background suddenly just continues from the same point at which it switched, but becomes 8-bit. And the hacking ability also gives an additional layer of gameplay mechanic, and helps distinguish the character from the others, simply because 9S is also not carrying a second weapon, for example. He's not that much of a fighter, he's a hacker, and when he hacks them hard. He does a lot of damage, so you're incentivized to use this as much as possible, and it has story purpose as well. It's pretty cool, I like it. Now, I did address that the game has many endings. What I did not mention is that most of them are jokes. Over 20 endings are just joke endings where you are being told to do something and you just disregard and do something else, and that leads to a joke ending. And I think it's pretty cool because other games, when they give you a specific task, they're either going to restrict you completely and say, go and do this now, you can't do anything else, or they're not going to restrict you, but you can do whatever the hell you want, and then that has no repercussions, which then destroys completely the story elements and pulls you out of this whole story, breaking the fourth wall for you. Because if there's some kind of attack and everyone's like, we're dying, come save us, and you're like, oh yeah, sure, let me just go and do this side quest in the meantime where I need to pick flowers for this girl. Then you realize, that this is not really urgent, because then you go an hour later or 3 hours later and everyone's waiting for you, nobody's dead yet. So that's something that I actually like here, that they did it so that if you do not react in certain times, you're gonna get a joke ending where it's gonna say things like, just with my previous example, which is very abstract, but just to repeat it, they're gonna say like, 9S decided to go and pick flowers instead of save the world, and therefore the game ended. Something like that. I'm making a stupid example because I'm making it up as I go, and I don't want to spoil any of the real endings, so I'm not gonna give you a real one. But you get my idea. Many endings, many of them joke endings. Now, another thing that I like in when it comes to this that I mentioned, that you have a feeling of urgency, is that this is how it is going to be for you when you play the game as well. If you get side quests and you want to do them, whenever you have the possibility to do side quests, there usually isn't an urgent main quest because of this mechanic. Because that means that if you want to go and you want to do side quests, you don't feel like you're ruining the story. Whenever there's a possibility to do side quests, the main quest is something that doesn't sound urgent at all, and therefore is not. So that's a great thing. Now, the next step that I want to address is the story. And that's probably one of the biggest pluses for me in this game, the story. I've said it many times, a story can make or break a game. A good story will basically make a game with bad gameplay still feel good to me. And the gameplay here is good. It's not perfect, it has its flaws, but it is good. But the story ramps up so much that it becomes excellent. It's original. It asks some really interesting existential questions, and all in all, it's just a really well written story, and that's something that the Japanese are good at. They can create stories, they can create sudden changes in the stories that nobody expected saw coming, that will really shake you as the viewer or the player. And that is something that is the case here, and it made me care. It made me care about these characters. it posed a dilemma for me at the end, because you have different things colliding at the end. You have to make choices, and these choices are not easy because both sides make good points. So thankfully we have the chapter select, so you can choose your favorite at first and then see what the other options are, so you don't feel like a total jerk to the other side. But the story is just excellent, and is what elevates this game from being a random mediocre game to, well, I'd even go as far as to quote a masterpiece, because that's probably the best story in 2017 that we will see. Of course, I would be happy if I am corrected. A better game comes out with a better story, but for now, this is absolutely a must play, especially because of the story. If you want to be entertained, if you want to really dive deep into a great story, that will be the game for you. Now, another really awesome thing about the game is the music. Honestly, I don't know what kind of taste in music you have, but this will probably satisfy anyone out there. The music is perfect. They sing in gibberish, so they're vocal, and they created a special language for this, which is supposed to be, according to the internet, a language that is designed of a combination of other languages and how they would naturally evolve within thousands of years, because the game happens in the distant future. But you're not gonna notice that. It just sounds really nice, from the soothing sounds of ambient music while you're walking through the city, and all of it is vocal. That's the thing that I love about. I really love female vocal music, and that's exactly what's happening here. And it's just awesome. It's absolutely phenomenal. I don't think anyone will argue with that. I've actually checked out people on the internet, and so far everyone's agreed pretty much. So it's not just that the music is good to me; it's just really excellent, excellent music in a game. And I did mention that you get to play as different characters, and especially later in the last segment, you get to switch between these characters dynamically. You don't do it by your own choice, but you fight some with one and then switch it to the other, and that's actually really original, and it adds to the story as well. I like that a lot, and I think it was awesome. So that's another thing that I enjoyed. And the last point I want to make for the game is the fact that it has really pretty graphics when it matters. So I did mention that there are some really bad graphics at times, but then at other times the graphics look really nice, and I think they did a good job with the resources they had so far. So all in all, did I like the game? Yes, I ended up loving it. I started enjoying it slightly, and then it got more and more and more. It then plummeted again through the second playthrough, because I felt like I'm basically replaying the game a second time, and everything's the same. There were very, very few deviations from the first playthrough, and I also thought that it was short at first, because I didn't realize that the third playthrough is actually going to offer me completely new content, absolutely new, all of it. So when that happened, I was really surprised, and I liked that. So also that's where the story really ramps up. So the third playthrough is really where stuff starts happening, and that's where the game elevated itself from being good to being excellent. So what I'm trying to say is you should play this game. Definitely should not miss Nier Automata. You're going to enjoy it one way or the other, but if you do decide to play it, be sure to stick around until the end of the third playthrough. And we really shouldn't be calling them playthroughs. We should really call them 3 segments, because as I've said, the story is told from playthrough 1 to playthrough 3, and really the third one is a continuation of the first two, and the first two are basically the same first part of the story being told from 2 different perspectives. So be sure to try the game. You're going to like it. I'm sure I did. And let me know what you think of it in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you on the next video.